Ch 13 The last temptation of the well-heeled. Greed, in the form of attraction to bargains, is a very strong motivating factor. Many times I've bought things I didn't need simply because they were such a bargain. You might even be like me and often fall into that trap. But don't hesitate to recognize greed as a very strong factor either for low-priced 31 of 89 merchandise, or for expensive products that have low prices. Too low a price may diminish your credibility, unless you justify the low price. Many people are willing to risk something and take chances just to get more for their money. Greed is simply the physiological trigger you use when you provide the prospect with more value than he or she really feels entitled to. In one of my earlier calculator ads in the Wall Street Journal, I offered a calculator for $49.95 and the manufacturer got really upset with me. The product should have sold for $69.95, and now I have dealers all over the country calling me and complaining, screamed the manufacturer. Don't worry, I said. I'll correct it. So I ran a small ad in the Wall Street Journal announcing my error, raising the price from $49.95 to $69.95, and giving consumers just a few days to respond at the old price. The ad outpulled the previous one, with people buying the calculator within those few days at $49.95, even though the size of the ad was considerably smaller. I had provided more value than the consumer felt entitled to, as a result of my error. Greed is not a technique that can be employed all the time. But it should be recognized as an effective element that, when properly employed, is a great trigger for making a sale, because it plays on practically everybody's weakness. When you lower the price of a product, generally speaking, with very few exceptions, you'll end up with an easier sale requiring less justification and less logic. Keep lowering the price, and you'll create and enhance the emotional desire for that product that will defy all logic and any need to justify the purchase. In fact, go low enough and all sense of reason and logic is thrown out the window. The purchase becomes a completely emotional reaction with no credibility required. Of course, if you go too low you'll have to add a little justification for the lower price, as it will start raising a few credibility issues with your prospects. A good example was an ad I wrote to sell a printing press for $150,000, when the press normally sold for $650,000. In this instance, I mentioned that the first buyer disappeared after putting a sizable deposit down and had not been seen since. My prospects were able to take advantage of an opportunity that was indeed the truth. I called it a missing person sale and it drew quite a response. Greed is not a very positive human trait. But it exists, and it is a force to consider when communicating with your prospects. For example, if I had a product that had a retail price of $100, and had a customer to whom I could sell that product for $60 and make a profit, I might start out offering the product at $100. Another very subtle example is a prospect who would rather pay $50 for a standard model of a product. I would first pitch the deluxe version for $150. Then, when I offered the lower priced product, it would appear to be much cheaper than if I had presented it first. At first this may not seem like greed, but the lower price does generate a sense of greed, in that it makes the lower price appear to have much more value. If you lower the price of something, you will almost always sell more of that product. The intensity of salivation in your prospect's greed glands will vary in proportion to the drop in price. There are very few exceptions to this rule, although I have indeed heard of exceptions. But often the exceptions don't give all of the facts, as they mislead you into thinking it is possible. If indeed there is an exception to this rule, there must be other factors in play that must also be analyzed. In my seminars I taught my students a very important lesson about greed and the factors that come into play when you change the price of a product. It was during our Creative 32 of 89 session, when I was showing them how to get their creative juices flowing with the Debono Think Tank. This is a spherical device that holds 14,000 words printed on small pieces of plastic, with a small window through which some of the words are visible. First I mix up all the words and then select somebody from the group to read out loud the first 3 words that he or she saw through the window of the think tank. The rest of the class would then shout out ideas on a possible ad concept using those 3 words. For example, if the product was a treasure detector and the words were uncle, caterpillar, and deceive, the storyline they created might be about this uncle who hides a treasure in a toy caterpillar tractor and deceives everybody about its true whereabouts. Somehow these elements would be used to sell something totally unrelated to the 3 words. By using unrelated words, the thinker or writer has to get away from the traditional way of just telling about the features of a product and focus on some concept. The think tank is a tool that helps you break away from the traditional way of thinking and reach out to different combinations, relationships, and permutations from your vast mental network. After I presented the exercise to the class and they saw the magic and fun of the think tank, the device really sold itself. I always waited for somebody in the class to raise his or her hand and ask, where can I buy one of those things? I would then go into a sales pitch to prove several points. The think tank costs only $19.95 wholesale, so if there's anybody here who wants one, just raise your hand. At that moment, all the participants raised their hands. And why not? The item looks like a lot more than $19.95, and for an aid to creativity and the help it provides, it makes a great purchase as well as a conversation piece. I didn't have to sell it, but rather just mention the price. But then I came back with my first surprise. Well, I'd like to buy them for $19.95 too. Actually the price is $99.95. I was kidding about the $19.95 price. I mean, what do you expect? How many want it now? About 1/4 of my students raised their hands. The rest are straining to decide. Maybe a few more hands go up after some contemplation. I then continued, now listen, $99.95 isn't really a lot. First, there are 14,000 words on little pieces of plastic, all in this beautiful plastic sphere and mounted on this 3-point stand. Look at it this way, if you get just one idea from this think tank and you make just $1,000 more from your ad, isn't it worth it? Now, how many people want to buy this at $99.95? The hands go up and now 2/3 of my students want the think tank. Certainly not as many as wanted it at $19.95, but quite a few more than wanted it without my explanation. In short, I had to do a lot more selling as a result of the higher price point and I still ended up with fewer purchasers. At this point I explained to the class, we have just learned several important marketing lessons. At a very low price, you don't have to say much about the product. Just present the product. If people understand what the product is and the perceived value is far greater, there will be people who will buy it whether they need it or not. No need for long copy, no need to explain much of anything. Just let greed do its natural thing. But raise the price without providing proof of value and the response drops dramatically. Do a sales job justifying its purchase, you can bring up the demand but interestingly, not to the same high level as at the $19.95 price point. Greed truly wins out. Notice that as we raised prices, the response rates dropped. When the price of a product goes up, the number of units sold goes down and more effort to educate and persuade is 33 of 89 required to sell the product. But drop the price and show tremendous value, and greed will alone drive the sales. You should recognize greed as an important factor when selling your prospect. By providing more value than your prospect expects, you will enhance the power of this valuable trigger. Trigger 13 Greed. CH14-Brain Surgery for Dummies. A beautiful example of the power of the next trigger took place at the airport in Maui, Hawaii, in 1998. I was on United Airlines Flight 49 to San Francisco. When I arrived at the gate to board, I noticed a few people asking for their money back at the check-in desk. I also observed that the waiting lounge was quite crowded. When I approached one of the ground personnel at the gate to inquire what was happening, I was told that there was a part on the plane that wasn't working and that nobody could board the airplane. We can't even fix the part and we even have to keep the passengers off the plane while it is being fueled, was the reply. Then the ground person picked up the microphone and made the following statement: "Ladies and gentlemen, the pilot is too busy doing his final flight check to explain what is wrong with the airplane. He mentioned that if anybody wanted to get off the plane, they may do so." At this point, there was a rush of passengers, maybe 20 of them running up to the counter to cancel their tickets and get off the airplane. Woo, I thought, what's going on? The rest of the passengers' faces showed great concern in the wake of the announcement. I asked the man who had just made the announcement, what actually is wrong? It's the APU or EPU or something like that and it's broke, so we have to keep the airplane running, and people are thinking that this part will affect their safety. And the pilot won't step out of the cockpit to say anything. I looked at the frustrated man and said, "May I make an announcement? I'm a pilot." He looked at me, almost relieved, and handed me the microphone. "Go ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" I announced as the entire lounge hushed to silence. "I'm a passenger on this flight just as you are. But I'm also a pilot and I think I can shed a little light on what is happening. When the airplane taxis into the gate, to conserve fuel it is plugged into another electrical power source. Somebody runs up to the airplane and plugs this huge plug into the belly of the airplane. That plug is from an APU or auxiliary power unit. The plug is the APU plug. Apparently the APU is not functioning, so the ground crew must keep the engines running while they fuel the tanks. By law, you can board the plane while it is being fueled if the 34 of 89 engines are running. There is nothing wrong with the plane. It is perfectly safe. In fact, the pilots are bigger chickens than any of us passengers and won't fly the ship if it doesn't check out perfectly. You can feel perfectly safe flying this plane. Like I said, I'm a passenger just like you are and I don't work for United either. But I do know that you'll have a safe flight to San Francisco. Thank you." At that moment the entire lounge burst out in applause. Relief came across the faces of those concerned passengers who a few minutes ago didn't know what to do. And the line of passengers waiting at the counter to cancel their flights just filtered away. A few of the flight attendants came up to me and thanked me. "You really provided us with incredible damage control." And one passenger commented, "I don't know what you do, but whatever it is you should be in communications." I had just saved United Airlines thousands of dollars in canceled reservations. I had saved a lot of passengers from plenty of worry and concern, and had helped the ground personnel straighten out a confusing situation. As a result of the power of my credibility, I was able to totally turn around the attitude of the passengers. Credibility is indeed a powerful trigger. If you convey honesty and integrity in your message, chances are you've gone a long way toward establishing your credibility. However, credibility is not just honesty and integrity. Credibility is being believable. When I got up there to make my announcement, I was a pilot and a passenger who had knowledge to share. I was credible. The pilot would have been, too, but he wasn't available. The ground personnel were not knowledgeable and thus created a near calamity. Credibility also means truthfulness. Does the consumer really believe you? Rash statements, cliché BS, and some exaggerations will remove any credibility your offer might have had. One of the biggest factors that can affect credibility is not resolving all the objections that are raised in your prospect's mind so that they think you're hiding something or avoiding an obvious fault of the product or service. You need to raise all objections and resolve them. You are, in essence, sensing the next question the prospect may come up with and answering it in a straightforward, honest, and credible way. The integrity of your product, your offer, and yourself are all on the line, and unless you convey the highest credibility in your presentation, your prospects will not feel comfortable buying from you. When I appear on QVC, the TV home shopping channel, it is easy to sell a difficult product that normally would require a lot of credibility. The reason, QVC already has a lot of credibility with its customers. If a product is being offered on QVC, it must be good. It must have the quality the customers have come to expect. Chances are the product will be bought by somebody who has bought product from QVC before and already feels that the company is a very credible concern. In short, I piggybacked my product onto QVC's credibility, and the combination of QVC's credibility and my product's credibility is pretty powerful. The effect of credibility also extends to the magazines or newspapers in which I advertise. If I advertise my product in the Wall Street Journal, I am piggybacking onto their credibility and their constant vigilance, making sure their readers aren't being taken advantage of. On 35 of 89 the other hand, if I place that same ad in the National Enquirer, I take on the credibility or lack thereof that this publication has established with readers. Again, credibility is affected by the environment in which you are selling. The same holds true in the personal selling situation. You can also enhance credibility through the use of a brand name product. For example, if I'm offering an electronic product by the name of Yerkes with the exact same features as one whose brand name is Sony, which one has more credibility? The Sony would probably sell better, even if it were at a higher price. Adding an appropriate celebrity endorser is another effective way to enhance credibility. The name of a company can, too. There was a company by the name of the Tool Shack that sold computers. This company's name actually detracted from the credibility of the product they were selling. We once ran the same ad in the Wall Street Journal to test the effect of our JSNA brand name against one of our lesser-known names consumers. In the test, the JSNA ad far outpulled our other ad. Only the name of the company was different. Sometimes a city or state can add credibility. That's why some companies locate in larger cities. If I were in publishing, I would want my offices in New York City, the publishing capital of the world. If I was marketing a perfume, I would want offices in London, Paris, New York, and Beverly Hills. If I had to go in for brain surgery, I would want a top brain surgeon with impressive credentials, not somebody who walks in with a book entitled Brain Surgery for Dummies. The credentials, the top people, and even the spokesperson for a company are all important in establishing credibility. One of the techniques I used in my mail order ads to build credibility was inserting a technical explanation to add a certain expertise to my advertising message. A good example of this technique is the following caption, which I wrote for a picture of the integrated circuit in a watch. A pinpoints to the new decoder driver integrated circuit, which takes the input from the oscillator countdown integrated circuit and computes the time while driving the display. This single space-age device replaces thousands of solid-state circuits and provides the utmost reliability all unique to sensor. Very few people would be able to understand this technical commentary. In fact, when I sent the ad to the manufacturer for approval, he called my attention to the caption under the picture and said, "What you wrote there is correct, but who is going to understand it? Why did you even use it?" Providing a technical explanation, which the reader may not understand, shows that we really did our research. If we say it's good, knowing what we know, then it must be good. It gives the buyer confidence that he or she is indeed dealing with an expert. Incidentally, the watch was one of our best-selling products. The product does not have to be a very technical product for you to come up with a technical explanation. For example, Frank Schultz wrote an ad after he had attended my seminar. How simple a commodity is grapefruit. Yet in the ad, he talked about his quality control procedures and how he won't accept grapefruit that had sheep nose, which he defined as having a bulge on the stem. He was able to include a technical explanation about grapefruit to demonstrate his expertise. In a mail order ad or in person, technical explanations can add a great deal of credibility, but you must make sure that you indeed become an expert, and your statements must be accurate. If not, the consumer will see right through the ploy. 36 of 89. This technique could be equally effective in a sales presentation if it is used to establish the credibility and expertise of the salesperson, and if the material presented is relevant to the sale. However, using this technique just for the sake of using it may have a counter effect and reduce your credibility. An overuse of technical explanations will only put distance between you and the prospect, as the prospect may glaze over and quickly enter a daydream state. There are a lot of ways to add credibility, and realizing this is important when you're crafting your sales presentation and creating the selling environment for your product. Use the methods explained here as a checklist to determine which techniques make sense for what you are selling, and then use them discreetly. They are indeed very powerful when included in a well-crafted sales presentation. Trigger 14. Credibility.